let's just talk about, let me drink some water and we'll talk about Mr. SpongeBob's first episode, which did premiere after the 1999 Nickelodeon Kids' Choice Awards. Kind of infamously that they did that. So, what I was surprised by when watching this, and I'm talking about Help Wanted, Reef Blowers, and Tea at the Treedome, is that this sets up so much. It's pretty much like an origin episode. Like, if I was actually sort of surprised how much this first episode sets up the whole show. It's honestly kind of shocking how much it did. Help Wanted, I think, the most because it helps up SpongeBob getting a job at the Krusty Krab. But I think the first thing that's interesting, this is the very first thing that surprised me, is the narrator is like, where would a sponge live? In a pineapple, of course. Like, I didn't know that. Now you're probably like, well, it was in the theme song. But no, here's the thing. Is like, the crazy thing about this is there was a time when nobody knew that. Like, that wasn't something you knew. And the show is like, yeah, you don't know this because it's the first episode. I was like, that is weird. Like, everyone knows SpongeBob lives in a pineapple under the sea. But like, when this premiered, if you missed the theme song or something, you didn't know. This is your first encounter. And the show's like, yeah, you don't know. I was like, whoa, that's weird. But this is very much into the origin story of SpongeBob, where he sees the Krusty Krab, he sees there's a Help Wanted sign. Squidward, who lives next door to him, does not want him to do this. And they sort of like ask him to get this crazy spatula. He leaves, and then a ton of anchovies in tour buses descend onto the Krusty Krab. Would you ever worked at a restaurant where a group decides we're all going to eat at this restaurant right now and you have to deal with it? Which is like, financially for your business and tips and stuff that can work out. But oh my God, it's so intense during that time. It's like, by the time it's over, just like, it's like you have to be really in it. And like, as much as like the show is being silly and stuff, if you ever worked at a restaurant and a large group just shows up and you have to get all their orders and do everything right and do it efficiently and all that stuff, it feels like this cartoon. Like, my God, whoa, that it's like too real. But one thing I think this cartoon does very well, and it establishes, is, you have SpongeBob, they're sort of disregarding him, and then he comes back with this crazy spatula and makes a ton of the burgers and does it really efficiently and saves the day. And it's like, you explain that how SpongeBob would work at the Krusty Krab, why they like that he works there, why he's the fry cook. It's all explained, and it's like you never have to question it again. And it's crazy that we don't question it at this point, but they actually set up an episode where, like, if they ask Mr. Krabs, like, why do you hire this guy? You go, well, let me tell you about his first day. And like, it plays in a very like relatable, kind of simple way, and it's very efficient, very tight. I really actually liked how well they did it. I was kind of surprised, as other parts of this episode, how well they set things up. It was like, I was kind of shocked. I was like, I don't think never see shows set everything up this well. This show also features the Tiny Tim song, Living in the Sunlight, Loving in the Moonlight. This was because it was sort of like a temp thing, but they wanted to keep it in. This became sort of contentious between Nickelodeon not wanting to pay the Tiny Tim estate, so it was not on certain DVDs early on, but it was on DVDs later, and is on streaming when I watched it. Tiny Tim died shortly before they started using it, so Tiny Tim did not, certain people say he did, but according to anyone who worked on it, he did not get to hear his song in SpongeBob, but I have heard of people getting into him because of this. He kind of had more nostalgia at the time for like his wedding on, he was on Johnny Carson, and like people play his songs and stuff, so he wasn't like entirely obscure, but he was sort of like this pop culture oddity. And I like that they just sort of, you like use it naturally and they don't like call them out. And SpongeBob is sort of strange, it sort of just fits into it naturally. But yeah, so if you have older DVDs in this episode, or just Help Wanted is not included, it's because Nickelodeon just didn't want to have to pay the estate of Tiny Tim, which is fucking bullshit if you ask me. But I think this is I thought it was a fun episode, and shocking how well it sets up the characters and what we'd see going forward. They very much knew what they were doing with this, and I was like kind of surprised how self-assured they were. The next one, which of the three, this is probably the least notable, which is Reef Blower. It has no dialogue, and it's just SpongeBob is trying to use this like kind of like leaf blower thing to get rid of like dirt and stuff in front of his house. But him and Squidward, there's no dialogue, anything like that. It honestly just felt like, SpongeBob would sometimes in the early days play with like, let's do things off camera and make a lot of noise, let's mess with the audience stuff, and this kind of feels like that. It doesn't feel super inspired. I'm not exactly sure why it was included other than to like kill time or whatever, but it's fine. I don't really have much to say about it other than I was like, it's kind of neat they did it without dialogue, but it's probably the least memorable of the three. Oh, okay, so the Reef Blower thing apparently was just made because the test pilot at the beginning wasn't long enough and they needed to do something, but that's interesting. Now the next one in the last segment, which is Tea at the Treedome, is one I do remember a lot actually, and it's actually maybe one of the first ones I saw. I remember there was this feeling at the time like Nickelodeon's finally doing real cartoons again, like Ren and Stimpy and stuff. That was the feeling at the time. We didn't know about John K then, because I remember the one cut to just a sponge and a starfish. I totally remember that one. I think I actually saw it in '99 or something. But it's basically that SpongeBob meets Sandy in the water. She invites him to her place, which is obviously like an air kind of container thing. He keeps getting dried out because he needs water and stuff like that. And that was very funny. I really do remember. I think it might have been the first thing I saw. I really did like this. But I do remember people saying like, oh, this is like a quality cartoon versus like that cat dog thing and all this other stuff. I was like, I mean, whatever, but I do really like it, and I like how it establishes Sandy. I mean, it's like all the main cast is established in this episode, like Patrick, Squidward, SpongeBob, and Sandy, and Mr. Krabs, which is pretty insane. I think, but yeah, I still remember the cut where they come in to, I really like this one because it was such an odd thing at the time, and I still like it, but it's a good intro to Sandy, and I like the whole idea of like they really can't exist without water, and her wanting to have them come to tea, and how open SpongeBob is to new people, which I think is like really works about it. It's sort of odd and he doesn't really understand it, but it plays more like an innocent way, not just like he's a stupid idiot way. But I think like him and Patrick together, you can get kind of the comedic foils of them getting into this. But I still remember like it feels so expected now, but when they cut to like them being so dried out, he's just a starfish and a sponge, I remember being like shocked at how funny it was. So I like this episode. It is not the greatest SpongeBob episode ever, but it is surprising how smart they were about SpongeBob SquarePants and how well they knew these characters, how well they knew to set everything up in such a way. It's kind of shocking. Like I review other first episodes and first pilots and you sort of get the concept and stuff, but this was like real smart world building and really good at like establishing it through the first two segments, doing it so well. I think it actually worked really well, and it's probably what set it up for success, honestly. And I can see like seeing this after the Kids' Choice Awards and then watching a random episode and understanding like he works the Krusty Krab, he's friends with Sandy, he lives next to Squidward and Patrick. Like, you know everything and you know why it is, and you don't have to question it anymore, even though it is a weird show about a sponge with SquarePants and stuff. And that, I think, is probably a really smart thing and definitely makes me understand why this thing has been going for 25 years, because they set it up and established it so well with this first episode.